Heels against the marble floor echoed in the grand hall, a sound sharp enough to slice through the chatter and laughter swirling around me. I tightened my grip on my clutch and kept my head high, though every fiber of my body screamed to turn around and leave. The family reunion, if you could even call it that, was in full swing. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light over tables dressed in white linen, each topped with fresh roses and champagne glasses. It looked like something out of a magazine, but the air was thick with the kind of politeness that only hides deeper cracks. I had barely stepped past the entrance when my Aunt Denise spotted me, her lips curled into that signature half-smirk she reserved for moments she could humiliate someone without raising her voice. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," she drawled, her manicured fingers wrapped around a champagne flute. Her eyes flicked over me like she was appraising a cheap dress in a luxury boutique. "Although, you're not even in the family photo." She let the words drip with fake pity before adding, "You don't belong here." Conversations around us quieted just slightly. Enough for people to hear, enough for my cousins to glance over with the faintest hint of smugness, like they were watching their favorite drama unfold. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to breathe. Years ago, I would have stumbled over a response or laughed it off, pretending it didn't matter. Not tonight. "Funny," I said, keeping my tone light, though my heart was pounding. "You still managed to find me in every room." Her smirk widened like she'd won something. "Sweetheart, the photographer probably doesn't even know you're related to us. It's better this way. Less awkward for everyone." She laughed softly, the sound as polished and cold as the diamond on her finger. The photographer, a tall man in his early 40s with a camera strap slung across his chest, stood only a few steps away. He looked up from adjusting his lens, eyes flicking between us. For a moment, I thought he'd ignore it, keep his head down like so many others in this family always did. But then, he straightened. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying over the low hum of conversation. "She's the one paying for this entire event." It was like someone hit the mute button on the room. Glasses froze halfway to lips. The smile fell right off Denise's face, her jaw slackening just enough to betray the shock she tried to hide. My cousin stopped mid-whisper, eyes darting from me to her. I didn't move, didn't say a word, just let the silence hang in the air, thick and heavy, while Denise's pale cheeks flushed red. Inside, though, I wasn't just satisfied, I was burning, because they had no idea that this was only the beginning. Denise's champagne flute trembled in her hand, the ice cubes clinking against the glass. She tried to recover, forcing a brittle laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, well, isn't that generous of you?" she said, her voice pitched higher now, like she was scrambling for footing. I didn't give her the relief of a reply. Instead, I slowly scanned the room, letting my gaze sweep over every single face that had looked at me tonight like I didn't belong. My Uncle Gerald, standing near the buffet table with his arm around his wife, suddenly found his plate of shrimp cocktail extremely interesting. My cousin Taylor, who had once borrowed money from me and never paid it back, busied herself adjusting the strap of her sequined dress. I could feel the shift. It was subtle, but it was there, like the way a current changes in the ocean. The smugness was gone. The sideways smirks had faded. Now there was curiosity and unease. The photographer, apparently unfazed by the weight of what he'd just dropped, turned back to his camera. "All right, let's get everyone in position," he said. "The main group photo." That was my cue. I took a few deliberate steps forward, my heels clicking in perfect rhythm. The crowd parted just enough to let me through, though I noticed more than one cousin whispering behind their hands. I positioned myself at the center, directly in front of the ornate floral arrangement that must have cost as much as someone's monthly mortgage. Denise lingered at the edge of the group, her smile now a strained mask. "Oh, you want to be in the middle?" she asked sweetly, though I could hear the venom underneath. I tilted my head slightly. "I paid for the middle," I said, my tone calm, almost conversational. But my words landed like a stone thrown into still water. Ripples of discomfort spread instantly. As everyone shuffled into place, I could feel the weight of the stairs on my back. Some of them weren't just surprised, they were calculating, already trying to figure out how they had missed this piece of information. "All right, on three," the photographer said. His voice was steady, professional, but I caught the faintest hint of amusement in his eyes as he glanced at me. 1, 2. Before he could say 3, my younger cousin, Emily, Denise's daughter, leaned in close enough for only me to hear. "Why would you spend so much money on them?" Her tone dripped with genuine confusion, like generosity toward this family was an alien concept. I didn't answer. Because she wouldn't understand. Not yet. The flash went off, blinding for a moment, freezing us all in that perfect frame. A family dressed in their best, smiling for the camera, utterly unaware that the foundation of their little hierarchy was about to crack. As the photographer moved on to candid shots, Denise stepped toward me, lowering her voice. "What are you trying to prove here, Ava?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Nothing," I said softly. "I'm just making sure the people who never saw me are finally looking." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and I could see the storm brewing behind her perfectly mascaraed eyes. She didn't like this version of me, the one who wasn't shrinking, apologizing, or laughing it off. And that was exactly why I wasn't going to stop. Because tonight wasn't just about a photograph. Tonight was the first move in a game they didn't even know they were playing yet. Dinner was served an hour later, but the air still hadn't settled. People kept sneaking glances at me like I'd suddenly grown a crown. The long dining tables gleamed under the chandeliers, silver cutlery polished to perfection, wine glasses lined like soldiers. Waitstaff in crisp uniforms floated between tables, pouring Merlot and setting down plates of roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and sautéed green beans. I took my seat at the far end, deliberately choosing the chair near the balcony doors, rather than the center where they'd usually corral the important family members. My position was strategic. I could see everyone, read their faces, and catch every whisper. It didn't take long before the murmurs began. My cousin Taylor was leaning toward her brother, whispering, "Did you know she was paying for all of this? Since when does Ava have that kind of money?" Her brother shrugged, muttering something back, but their eyes kept darting in my direction like they were trying to piece together a puzzle they didn't know existed until tonight. Halfway through the salad course, Uncle Gerald decided to test the waters. "So, Ava," he said loudly enough for several tables to hear, "this must have cost a pretty penny. What's the occasion?" Or, his lips curled faintly, "Is this one of those look at me now things?" Several relatives chuckled, not full laughter, just the kind of smug amusement people use when they think they've cornered you. I set my fork down slowly, letting the faint scrape against the china slice through the moment. "It's neither," I said evenly. "It's called being able to give without asking permission." The chuckles died. Even Gerald didn't have a quick comeback for that. Denise, of course, couldn't help herself. She dabbed at the corner of her mouth with her napkin, eyes locked on me. "You know, money's nice, but class. Class is something you can't buy." I leaned back in my chair, smiling faintly. "True, which is why I've never tried to buy it. I just noticed how expensive it is for some people to pretend they have it." A few gasps rolled through the table, and one of my younger cousins actually coughed into her drink. Denise's face hardened, but she turned away, pretending to focus on her plate. As the main course arrived, the tension only thickened. It wasn't anger, it was something sharper. Suspicion. They wanted to know where the money came from, why I'd spend it on them, and most importantly, what it meant for the unspoken hierarchy that had kept me on the outside for years. I could see the gears turning in their heads, and that was exactly what I wanted. They had always thought of me as the quiet one, the one they could mock in passing and forget about by dessert. Tonight, every bite of food they took would be seasoned with the knowledge that they'd underestimated me. I sipped my wine slowly, locking eyes with Denise again across the table. I didn't need to say a word. The message was already delivered. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this was only the first course in a much bigger meal I'd been preparing for years. By the time dessert was being served, the tension in the room had grown so thick you could slice through it with the cake knife the servers carried. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the sugary warmth of vanilla sponge and buttercream, but nobody seemed to care about the food anymore. Every pair of eyes found a reason to glance my way. I could feel the undercurrent pulsing at the table, half curiosity, half irritation. This wasn't just about a single night or a bill being covered. This was about their unspoken belief that I'd never stand shoulder to shoulder with them, let alone above them. The photographer moved discreetly between tables, snapping candid shots. He lingered near ours a beat too long, his lens catching the smallest details. The twitch in Denise's jaw, the stiff way Uncle Gerald lifted his cup, the way Taylor's eyes kept darting to me before flicking away. He knew, maybe even better than they did, that this dinner was turning into something far more interesting than a reunion. When the cake was sliced and passed around, I stood up. Not abruptly, slowly, letting my chair glide back against the polished floor, the sound subtle but sharp enough to hush the nearby chatter. I picked up my glass and let my gaze sweep across the room. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight, I began. My tone was warm, but my eyes didn't soften. Family is complicated. Some of us only see each other at events like this, and some of us... I let the pause hang for just a second longer than was comfortable. Only acknowledge each other when there's an audience. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Denise's fork froze halfway to her mouth. I wasn't sure if I should do this, I continued, but I've learned something important lately. Silence doesn't buy you respect. It only teaches people to ignore you. The room was silent now except for the faint hum of the heating vents. My heartbeat thudded steadily in my chest, but my voice stayed even. I paid for this evening not to prove a point, but to remind myself, and maybe a few of you, that I've never needed anyone's permission to belong here. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. At the far end of the table, my uncle's wife leaned in and muttered something to him. He didn't respond. He just kept watching me, like he wasn't sure whether to be impressed or unsettled. Denise finally set her fork down, her eyes locking on mine. Well, she said, her voice cool but tight, I'm sure we're all grateful. The word grateful sounded like it had been dragged over broken glass. I smiled faintly. I'm sure you are. A few gasps escaped from the cousins' table. My words weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. Tone could cut far deeper than volume. The photographer snapped another picture at that exact moment, and I had no doubt it would capture everything. The tension in Denise's expression, the confidence in mine, and the uncomfortable awareness radiating from everyone else. Inside, I felt the slow, satisfying shift of power. For years, they'd chosen the script where I was the quiet, overlooked background character. Tonight, I'd rewritten it without asking their approval. And the best part? We were far from the final scene. The tension lingered like humidity in the air, making it harder for anyone to relax. The servers were quietly clearing plates, moving like ghosts so they didn't interrupt whatever storm was brewing between me and Denise. Conversations had thinned out to faint murmurs and clinking silverware, but most people weren't even touching their dessert anymore. They were watching. Waiting. I set my glass down deliberately, letting the stem click against the polished wood. My fingertips rested lightly on the table's edge as I straightened, scanning every face in the room. This time, I didn't bother with the polite preamble. Do you know the funny thing about family? I said, my voice even but carrying across the hall. They'll remember every time you don't show up for them, but they'll forget all the times you stayed quiet to keep the peace. A few people shifted in their seats. My aunt's lips pressed together so tightly they almost disappeared. My uncle's gaze slid toward the tablecloth, as if it held something worth studying. I kept my head down for years, I continued, because I thought it was better to avoid conflict. But what I've learned is, silence doesn't protect you. It just makes you invisible. And invisible people are easy to dismiss. Denise's shoulders stiffened. If this is about me, she began, but I cut her off without raising my voice. It's about everyone who ever looked right through me while pretending I wasn't standing in the same room, I said. It's about the way some of you measure worth, not by how someone treats others, but by how loud their name is in a conversation. The murmurs started again, a low wave moving through the tables. I let them talk, watching. The unease ripple from person to person. And for the record, I added, leaning forward slightly, paying for tonight wasn't some act of charity. It wasn't revenge either. It was a reminder, to me and to you, that I'm not just here. I'm central to this family now, whether you like it or not. That hit. I could see it in their faces. Some were calculating, others embarrassed, and a few genuinely shocked. It was one thing for them to hear I'd paid for the event. It was another for me to stand here and say it without apology. Then I pulled the real card. Since we're all here, I might as well mention. This venue? It's mine now. Bought it 3 months ago, so technically, I let my gaze sweep across the room. You're all my guests. And Denise, next time you decide who belongs in a photo, maybe remember who owns the wall it's going to hang on. The silence was absolute. Even the servers froze. Denise blinked once, her jaw tightening so much I thought she might crack a molar. My cousins exchanged wide-eyed looks, torn between disbelief and the thrill of watching someone finally say what no one else dared. I leaned back, picking up my wine again. Now, shall we get another round of photos? I think this time, everyone will want to make sure I'm in the middle. The photographer grinned faintly, raising his camera. Denise's expression stayed locked in that strained, polite mask, but her eyes, they were burning. And I sat there, calm, sipping my wine, knowing I'd just shifted the balance for good. Because the truth was, this wasn't the end of anything. It was the start of a